An elderly homeless man sits in the rain, shaking, as someone hands him money. He looks up with tears streaming down his face and whispers something that changes everything. That moment in 1998 still haunts me today. What this stranger did with that $100 will shake you to your core, challenge everything you believe about kindness, and reveal a truth about human nature that most people never see. This is the story of Michael Patterson, the homeless man who taught me the hardest lesson of my life. It was a cold November evening in Seattle, 1998. Rain poured down like the sky itself was crying. I was 26 years old, working as a software developer during the dot-com boom, making more money than I knew what to do with. My pockets were full, but honestly, my heart felt empty. I walked past homeless people every single day on my way to the office. Sometimes I'd drop $1 or $2, feel good about myself, and keep walking. That night was different. I had just gotten my biggest bonus yet. $10,000. Cash. I stopped at the ATM and withdrew $500 just to feel the weight of success in my hands. Stupid, I know. As I walked toward my car, I saw him, Michael Patterson, an older man, probably in his 60s, sitting against a brick wall near Pike Place Market. He wasn't holding a sign. He wasn't asking for anything. He was just sitting there in the freezing rain, shaking uncontrollably, his clothes soaked through. Something hit me hard in that moment. Maybe it was the bourbon I'd had at the office party. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the universe telling me to wake up. I walked over to him, pulled out my wallet, and instead of giving him a few dollars like I normally would, I handed him a crisp $100 bill. His eyes went wide. His hands trembled as he took it. Michael Patterson looked up at me with tears mixing with the rain on his weathered face and said, "Thank you, sir. God bless you." I nodded, felt that familiar warmth of doing something good, and walked away, feeling like a hero. 3 days later, I saw him again. Same spot, same wall, same rain. But something was wrong. Michael Patterson was still wearing the exact same soaked clothes. He looked even worse than before. Thinner, weaker, shaking harder. My stomach dropped. Where was the $100? Did he get robbed? Did someone take it from him? I felt anger rising in my chest. I walked up to him, and I'm ashamed to admit this now, but I was ready to confront him, ready to ask him what happened to the money I gave him. Before I could say anything, Michael looked up at me with recognition in his eyes. He smiled. Actually smiled. "Sir," he said, his voice raspy and weak, "I've been hoping I'd see you again. I wanted to thank you properly." My anger melted into confusion. "Thank me? For what? You're still out here in the cold, Michael. What happened to the money I gave you?" He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small, worn photograph and handed it to me. It showed a young woman, maybe 19 or 20, with bright eyes and a beautiful smile. "That's my daughter," he said. "Sarah. She's in college in Portland, studying to be a nurse." I stared at the photo, then back at him. "I don't understand," I said. He coughed, a deep rattling sound that scared me. "The $100 you gave me, sir, I sent it to her. She called me 2 days ago crying because she couldn't afford her textbooks this semester. She was going to drop out. Your money saved her education." My mouth went dry. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "You sent her the money?" "All of it?" Michael nodded. "Every penny, sir. Sarah doesn't know I'm out here. She thinks I'm working construction in another state. I send her what I can, whenever I can. Your $100 meant she could stay in school another semester." I stood there in the rain, completely speechless. This man, who had nothing, who was freezing and starving on the streets of Seattle, gave away the only significant money he'd received in who knows how long to his daughter. He sacrificed everything for her future. I felt my eyes burning. "Michael," I said, my voice cracking, "why didn't you keep some for yourself? Get some food, dry clothes, a warm place to sleep for even one night." He looked at me like I'd asked the strangest question in the world. Because she's my daughter, sir. Her future is worth more than my comfort. That's what fathers do. Tell me in the comments, would you have done the same thing Michael did, or would you have kept the money for yourself? Be honest. That moment broke me. Completely shattered everything I thought I knew about sacrifice, about love, about what really matters in life. Here I was, making 6 figures, living in a comfortable apartment, complaining about my life being empty, and this man who had absolutely nothing was richer than I'd ever be. Richer in the ways that actually count. I sat down next to him on that wet sidewalk, ruining my expensive suit, and I started crying. Michael Patterson put his hand on my shoulder and said, "It's okay, son. We all do what we can with what we've got." That night, I didn't just give Michael money. I took him to a diner, bought him the biggest meal they had, and we talked for hours. He told me about Sarah, about how her mother died when Sarah was 12, about how he'd worked in construction for 30 years until an injury left him unable to work. He told me about the choices he made, the mistakes, the moments of pride. He told me that being Sarah's father was the only thing he'd ever done right, and he wasn't going to fail her now. Not while he still had breath in his lungs. I learned that Michael sent Sarah money whenever he could. Sometimes it was $5, sometimes 20. He did odd jobs when his back allowed it. He collected cans. He stood in the rain begging when he had to, swallowing his pride because Sarah's education mattered more than his dignity. She was going to be the first person in their family to graduate college. She was going to be a nurse. She was going to have the life he never could give her. And he was going to make sure of it, even if it killed him. Which I realized with horror it probably would. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I called Sarah. I got her number from Michael, told him I wanted to help, and he reluctantly agreed. When Sarah answered, I introduced myself as a friend of her father's. I told her everything, about seeing Michael on the street, about the $100, about him sending it all to her instead of using it for himself. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then sobbing. She had no idea. Michael had hidden his situation so perfectly that Sarah genuinely believed he was working construction in Spokane. She thought he was doing fine. Sarah drove to Seattle that same day. I met them both at a coffee shop near the market. The reunion was something I'll never forget. Sarah held her father and cried. She apologized over and over for not knowing, for not checking on him more, for being so focused on school that she missed the signs. Michael just held her and told her she had nothing to apologize for. He told her he was proud. So incredibly proud. She was doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing, exactly what her mother would have wanted, building a future. Here's where the story takes another turn. Sarah refused to go back to Portland and leave her father on the streets. She dropped out of college that week, came back to Seattle, got a job waitressing, and found a small apartment they could share. Michael begged her not to do it, told her she was throwing away everything they'd worked for. But Sarah was her father's daughter, stubborn, loving, willing to sacrifice everything for the people she cared about. She said they'd figure it out together, the way families do. I couldn't let it end that way. I'd watched a homeless man give away everything for his daughter's future, and now I was watching that daughter sacrifice her future to save her father. The cycle had to break somewhere, so I made some calls. I talked to my company's HR department about a janitorial position that had just opened up. It wasn't much, but it was steady work. Came with health insurance, and Michael's back could handle it. I personally vouched for him. They hired him within a week. Michael Patterson started working at the same building where I developed software. I'd see him in the hallways sometimes, always with a smile, always with dignity in his eyes. Then I talked to Sarah, told her about a scholarship program I'd recently learned about through work, told her I'd help her with the application. She got it, Full ride to finish her nursing degree at the University of Washington. She could stay in Seattle, live with her father, and continue her education. When I told them both the news, they cried. I cried. It felt like the universe was finally balancing itself out, even just a little bit. But here's the real twist that broke me all over again. 6 months later, I lost my job. The dot-com bubble started bursting. My company did massive layoffs, and I was one of them. Suddenly, the guy who'd been making 6 figures was unemployed, burning through savings, struggling to pay rent. I felt ashamed, scared, lost. I didn't tell anyone at first. Just sent out resumes and tried to figure out my next move. One morning, I found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. Inside was $200 in cash and a note that said, "For your textbooks. We take care of each other. That's what family does." It was from Michael and Sarah. They knew. Somehow they'd found out I'd lost my job, probably through someone at the old company. And these 2 people, who I'd helped when they had nothing, were now helping me when I had everything fall apart. That $200 wasn't much in practical terms, but it meant everything. It meant I wasn't alone. It meant the kindness I'd shown had created something bigger than a single transaction on a rainy street. It had created connection, family, purpose. If this story moved you, if Michael's sacrifice hit you the way it hit me, do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button. Because this channel is about real stories of real people who remind us what actually matters in this world. Stories that challenge us to be better, to see differently, to love harder. Subscribe and join this community of people who believe humanity is still worth believing in. Michael Patterson taught me that being broke and being broken are 2 completely different things. You can have nothing in your pockets and still be whole. You can have everything and still be empty. True wealth isn't measured by what you own, but by what you're willing to give away when it costs you everything. That $100 I gave Michael wasn't charity. It was an investment, not in his future, but in mine. It opened my eyes to what really matters. It connected me to 2 people who became like family. It taught me that the smallest acts of kindness create ripples we can't even imagine. I eventually found another job. Michael kept working until he could retire with a small pension. Sarah graduated top of her nursing class and now works at Seattle Children's Hospital, saving lives every single day. We still have dinner together once a month. Michael always insists on paying, even though I tell him it's not necessary. He says it is, says he wants to give back, says that's what family does, and he's right. The man I gave $100 to in 1998 gave me something worth infinitely more. He gave me perspective, purpose, proof that humanity is still beautiful even when the world feels cold and dark. Michael Patterson was never actually homeless in the ways that matter. He always had a home in his daughter's heart. He always had dignity in his choices. He always had wealth in his capacity to love someone more than himself. I was the one who was homeless that rainy November night, lost, disconnected, empty. Michael gave me a home. He gave me a family. He gave me a reason to believe in people again. So when people ask me about that night in 1998, when they ask what the homeless man did with the $100 that broke me, I tell them the truth. He showed me what unconditional love actually looks like. He showed me that sacrifice isn't about grand gestures, but about quiet choices made in the dark when nobody's watching. He showed me that being a good person isn't about how much you give when you have plenty, but about what you're willing to give when you have nothing left. Michael Patterson broke me in the best possible way. He broke open my heart and let the light in. And I've been a different person ever since. That's the real story. Not about money, not about homelessness. About 2 strangers who met in the rain and taught each other what it means to be human. About a father who loved his daughter more than his own survival. about a daughter who loved her father more than her own dreams, about a young man who learned that wealth without purpose is just paper in your pocket, and that the richest people in the world are the ones who know what's actually worth fighting for. Michael gave away that $100 and gained everything. I gave away that $100 and gained everything too. Sometimes the best investments we make are the ones that cost us something. That's when we find out who we really are. That's when we discover what we're actually made of. Michael Patterson didn't break me with what he did. He broke me open, and I'll be forever grateful he did.